All right, Joe. How you doing?
I'm doing well. About you today, Travis?
Good. So I'm Travis Potter. This is Joe Lewis, Nitro Joe from Green Lightning. Uh, we met about 6 years ago, 2020.
Yeah, a little after the whole COVID-19 thing took place in 2020.
That's right. So we met when one of the people that we were working with was working on some biological stuff. You guys were in the same orange field, working trying to figure out how to make oranges not have greening disease. We got introduced through that, and I was blown away. And I was like, okay, what is this technology, and how can I use it for organic agriculture? At the time, I thought, well, it's just air and water. Why couldn't it be organic? But at the same time, we were also on a for us, we were doing beverage stuff, we were doing livestock stuff, we had crops. We're trying to figure out how we're going to feed the world as the population grows. As we went through this process, back and forth, you first sent me some product and some seeds, and I put it on the seeds and they didn't grow. And I called you up and I'm like, you told me to do it. Now I realize why, because it was so strong. Those ones didn't grow, but the next ones I did it right and they grew. Not only did they grow, I had stuff growing in my greenhouses that I could not believe how fast they grew. And you were like, I don't know how it works, just spray it on and see how it works. So we tried it and we did different things. But going back to it, I want to go more origin story today. We've had lots of videos about Green Lightning and what we're doing, but I wanted a little bit more of, who is Nitro Joe? Who's Joe Lewis? Where did you come from? And how did you get into this technology? We'll start off with, you are a Florida native.
I am. I'm from Fort Lauderdale originally, and grew up in the marine industry down there. I went into the service when I was 20, rode submarines for about 5 years, and got out, went back into the marine industry, and shortly after 2001, I decided I wanted to do something different and jumped into alternative energy. And one thing morphed into another. Initially, I was working with hydrogen. We were building engines to run strictly on hydrogen. Then I worked on hydrogen fueling systems that would make engines run better, that using it as a secondary fuel. And then finally, around 2010, I had a fellow call me up and say, hey, you interested in working with us? They had just recently procured a plasma technology where they could strip the hydrogen out of natural gas. And they spent a lot of money for it, and they really didn't even know how to turn it on. They had visions of grandeur that it was going to be, the biggest thing out there. And it turned out to be a pretty big thing, but it needed a lot of development work. And along the way, I learned all the do's and don'ts about how to operate with the plasma. And that company ended up getting spun off, sold to a fuel cell company. They use it to this day to run solid oxide fuel cells. Some years after that, I worked at the emissions control work using plasma again, and that finally converted into making oxides of nitrogen that we were going to use for agricultural purposes. And I remember back about the time that we met in 2020, I'd been doing it a couple of years at that point, and I was looking back at some pictures I had on my phone recently. We always measure the nitrogen content in the water based on the parts per million. We had these little strips of paper that we would stick in the water, and it would be between white at 0 and kind of a magenta color at 50 parts or 500 parts per million. And we went from 0 to 30, and I said, yay, we hit the big time.
You made something.
Yeah, and back then that was a pretty big deal. Today, obviously, if we made one that was at 30 parts per million, we would say that we're a failure because we've come so far in the improvements of efficiency. And that was done as a collective team work between everybody that's part of Green Lightning, which is the company that we have today.
Yeah. All right. So going back to your time in the Navy, where all in the world did you go?
I was on a ballistic missile submarine, and we did our patrols out of Holy Loch, Scotland, and primarily in the North Atlantic. We went sometimes north of the Arctic Circle, and sometimes fairly far south, but we never crossed the equator. But it was always in the North Atlantic.
Did you ever go fishing?
Not on the submarine, no.
That'd be kind of hard to do, I imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. How deep did you ever go?
Well, that I could never talk about while I was in the service, and I'm going to assume, even though my submarine has been retired from service at this point, the only thing I can say is that we went 700 feet, and beyond that was confidential.
Okay. So that's and you have a son that's also been in the Navy.
Yes, my son, who has the same name as I do, he just retired from 21 years of riding submarines, and he was attached to 4 different fast attack boats. And he just recently joined the company with us, and I'm so excited to have him here. He brings a very different thought process and a very different sense of disciplines to the table that we desperately needed.
Yep. So whether it's you or anybody else, what is it like being underneath the water, where you see a different world?
Well, the world that you see is just what's inside the compartment that you're in at the time. You know, we make our own air, we make our own water. We have a steel hull, and we have some tiled floors and bunks to lay on when we're tired. And other than that, it's a lot of sophisticated control systems. So, but you really get to know the people that you work with very, very well. And there's a lot of the people that I met when I was in my time in the service remain among my best friends to this day, and I've been out of the service for over 35 years.
So so along with the friends, but the other one is you probably think about oxygen a little bit, being underneath the water.
That you do.
Yep, and maybe even nitrogen, because you had too much nitrogen, you're probably not going to breathe as much.
Well, you have to. The nitrogen-oxygen ratio is always fairly well balanced. We made our own oxygen on board, and we scrubbed out the CO2, and that got discharged. But we would use seawater through electrolysis to take out the oxygen, and the hydrogen, which is be a waste product for us at that point there, just went back out into the ocean.
So in that process, as a young man, you were already learning what you were going to be doing in the future.
Yeah, unbeknownst to me at that time, yes. Part of being in the submarine service is you have to have a clear understanding of every part of the different mechanisms that make a submarine work, whether it's oxygen generation, whether it's torpedo or missile fire control, or whether it's nuclear propulsion. We had to learn everything aspects. So along the line, you figure out, okay, how to make oxygen. Well, that came into play later in my career when I decided to change what it was that I do, and to make oxygen, or to make hydrogen in one case, and ultimately we end up finding ourselves making oxides of nitrogen, which is what we're doing today.
So tell us a little bit about hydrogen engines, and how do you break hydrogen? Like, what's the process, and is it really that efficient or not?
Well, there's a handful of different methodologies of creating hydrogen.